Like,
All right, we are live.
I cannot.
Okay.
No, you can see.
Yeah, so you have to move.
You have to move.
Well, you go there.
I go here.
Yes. So you
This
can-
looks stupid. Jakes. So what are we going to talk about? Now I'm not in the frame though.
We're in live now?
Yeah, we're already live.
Okay, conference room people.
Come a little bit closer.
A little closer.
Come
Me?
like this. Come more. Yes. That's good.
Okay.
You can come a little bit
But now
closer.
we're not talking to each other, right?
It's okay.
No, but you can sit a little bit like
Like this?
no.
Like this?
Like this.
Oh, okay.
Ah,
Yes. And then you will go closer.
go closer. Come closer. Come closer. Come closer.
You
I
have to go
love
closer.
this.
No, you. Because I'm already covered. You too.
All right. Hold
You
on, let me
see?
get my phone.
Yeah. You. Ghazali.
Yeah.
Closer. More.
Yeah.
Closer? More closer?
Yeah, you can now.
Yes. No.
Okay.
So man, the most visual person is this guy.
Yeah.
You have to be lean like this.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's more balanced now.
All right.
Because on one leg.
It's already live.
We're already live, yeah. So like people were watching all this
That's good.
all these
Yeah, but
shenanigans. that
we
we're
are
doing.
going to discuss two things today, right? The most important thing is the UNDRIP, the adoption, the historical fact.
You have to speak louder.
Yeah, I gotta speak a little bit louder though.
The microphone is quite far.
If I speak louder, then the people
We have a
disturb.
microphone over here, so like you gotta lean a little bit in. Like people want to know your listen to your
My chair cannot move
amazing
any-
voice and see your face.
But now you could move a little bit the camera to your left.
What is the question?
Because
I
Binota can like a lean like this. So there's space.
Yeah, there's a
What?
So,
Oh.
so lean it a little bit to the left.
No, camera.
The camera?
Yes.
Okay.
A little bit to the left.
Yeah.
Oh shoot.
Ah.
All right.
See?
See?
Much better, yeah.
Yes.
All right. Let me
Very good.
see how this goes. All right.
Yeah.
Okay. I can see questions. No, yeah. So people are responding already. Like, wanting me to-
Let's ask if you guys are hearing our voices. Do
Yeah.
you hear really well, or would we need to speak more louder even?
good
So if you
question.
guys can comment firstly on that matter.
Yeah.
Do you hear our voices well?
Well, let's see if that.
Binota can come a little bit closer.
No, that's all right. I'm okay.
No. And then lean to your left. Yes.
Oh.
So I think we'll have to, just wait a little bit for people to respond and to migrate.
So
Are they okay with their
Loud and
sound
clear.
system?
Okay. Emily says she can hear us loud and clear.
okay, that is good.
Jessica says perfectly.
Good.
Okay.
So, Miss Master of Ceremony, please start.
Master ceremony. Oh, come on. Okay. So what? Today is the 12th anniversary of the adoption of the Declaration of Rights of Indigenous Peoples, and if you can see, if you look around us, this is the actual General Assembly hall in Geneva, and where it used to be like the GA of the UN, but now it's moved to New York, of course. At least I think it's a very significant place to talk about the declaration because it was adopted today by the GA, General Assembly. What were the numbers again? 144 in favor, 4 against, and 11 abstentions. And but the significance of that is that the 4 that voted against, they changed their position in favor of the Declaration of Rights of Indigenous Peoples. It's not by coincidence. We are here in Geneva for the Human Rights Council for the work that we do on resolution. I don't know if we want to talk about that, but I think it's much more interesting to talk about the declaration, what it does for us, what we think about it, and maybe if we can go like into like what do we see in the future, what are new frontiers, what are the things that we that we want to talk about, and then people can of course like ask questions online, or say something, or share their thoughts or whatever. I see. Oh, I have to do a shout out to Holland. All right. Shout out to Sean. This is fun. And there's some people watching us, even all the way from the Pacific, Tuvalu, Kenya. People from Taiwan are also watching. So, if you have any questions, just ask them. We have a little bit of time. But I think, we'll do a little bit of a spiel, a little bit of a chat, and then if you have any questions, then we'll just go to your questions.
Yeah, I guess we were wondering that as it is the anniversary of the Declaration 12, we wanted to put up a little bit Facebook Live for questions and comments, and also share some of our thoughts. So as the Declaration was adopted in 2007, I think that even though slowly, we Indigenous peoples globally, together with the member states, have been able to step by step move towards implementing the actual Declaration. Even though it's happening quite slowly, but we see that I think that there has been a movement forward. And the Declaration has been instrumental on raising Indigenous peoples' human rights to agenda, and in a manner that it's easy to identify to everybody, for Indigenous peoples themselves, for member states also, that they cannot anymore deny the specific narratives of Indigenous peoples' human rights and specific needs there. So it's globally accepted standard and so forth. And we see also that the Declaration has been more and more taken into the interpretations of international law. And that is, of course, development forward. For example, the Human Rights Commission has been using the Declaration in their own verdicts and decisions as a guiding principles on what kind of decisions they are making and how to interpret, for example, ICCPR and other conventions that have been ratified and made in UN and ratified by member states. I think that we're not going to talk that much about the 20 years of negotiations of the Declaration. I think that people have been talking that really much, but if we can kind of consider it, what we have, what has happened like 2007 and afterwards, to kind of think, and I mean, and saying that we have been achieving some steps forward. And one of the concrete examples of that is the World Conference Outcome Document. And when the World Conference on Indigenous Peoples was held in 2014, all the member states agreed to implement it on a national level. You know, there's been a huge debate from 2007 that is the Declaration legally binding or not. And to my, as I see it, there is a little point on talking that, because it is a commitment from the member states to be used, and in 2014 it was confirmed, and I would say in my own language ratified, that the Declaration has an impact on national level. The member states have committed themselves to implement it by national action plans and by other means and measures, taking into account legal, legislation, policy decisions on implementing the Declaration. So even though we talk that, and many people are saying that the Declaration is implemented really slowly and it's not bringing the effect to the ground, It's only 12 years old now, and an actual commitment from 2014 is now 5 years old. So I think that we are slowly moving towards fully implementing the declaration also on the national levels, not just on UN level and international level. And I think that is achievement that we have to continue work upon in the future, but also appreciate that the declaration is slowly moving to the ground.
What do you think, Binota?
Yeah, from my point of view, well, as Tuomas mentioned, we have significant achievement about the UN, about getting the UNDRIP as an international instrument. And if I see from my point of view, this is international level achievement. But now the challenge is how you bring those international instruments, applications on the ground. And if we also see other elements here, the movement of the indigenous peoples, most of the Asian countries, and I think this is also applicable to Latin America, Africa, and other regions, is the political movement and their right to self-determination. So now we have these provisions in the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, and also these articles. Also, we see the two international covenants, like Civil and Political Rights Covenant and also the Economic, Social and Cultural Rights. And that's also, in a way, it's a universally adopted provisions. So now the question is, among ourselves, whether we are also committed to take this article as a forward for our political achievement on the ground. The question is whether we are actually doing or working on that to gain or to achieve our self-determination rights. In my observation, since the adoption of the UNDRIP and until now, we are very much focused, particularly the moment case, except few countries or few regions, among one or two regions, mostly focused on the project-based activities that we are deciding ourselves, like through the project activities, the improvement of the human rights development or improvement or human rights situation, this and that. But the political point, the right to self-determination, how we actually framing through this context to achieve for sustainable achievement for our case. For example, if I give you self-governance. Your self-governance also related to the concept of the land, territories, and resources. And now land, territories, and resources, that the rights you will have, you will exercise, that needs the right to self-determination recognized by the state. So now the point is whether we are actually talking about that. We are actually focusing on that. Like it's also coming with autonomy. It is nothing about you are asking something different or separatist from the sovereign state, but this is more within the sovereign state, your autonomy, how you are framing under this UNDRIP framework.
Yeah.
Actually, we are not taking this kind of discussion forward. That's my observation, not very much. So this is the most important part. If we want to achieve the UNDRIP, we want to achieve to the human rights as a framework for the indigenous people's rights, we need to think about how actually our political rights we can get under this UNDRIP. For example, right to self-determination. And the second point is then, I feel that UNDRIP, for the achievement of the UNDRIP, the first thing is coming with a land territorial issue and the right to self-determination over the land territory. Yeah. So this is the most important part, then how we can politically motivate.
Yeah.
Of course, 12 years is not long. It's a teenage now. But the thing is, whether we also the activists doing working in different parts of the world, whether we are thinking about that, how we should frame our political rights movement, getting the self-determination rights, thinking about the self-governance systems, thinking about the land and territorial resources as an indigenous people. That's our identity. Yeah. Land is the main source. So that's what I think. Like we still have far way to go, even though we have achieved a lot at the international level. After the UNDRIP, we have this expert mechanism. Even though it was replaced the working group of indigenous peoples, and then we have now also a higher level of discussions on the indigenous peoples' participation on the issues affect them. And also, if you see, the UNDRIP always frame as a guidance framework for many international bodies. For example, UNFCCC, creating this local communities platform, and also in the CBD, talking about the referring the UNDRIP and also other UN agencies. So that's all our achievement. Now, if we want to bring all this together, so my understanding is we have to think also from the political rights view.
100%.
How the political rights are actually consolidated with all this achievement, and how this is also grounded on the local level. So that's my opinion.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I would fully agree with that, and that's why, for example, we need strong indigenous UN mechanisms to keep pushing the important topics to be discussed and pushed forward on international level. Like, I'm really happy with the expert mechanism and its new mandate. You know, their decisions on putting FPIC as a first report topic of the reports, and now next year the self-determination will be coming up as a topic. So I really much appreciate that the hardcore elements are brought up and focused on international level, because I fully agree that the right to self-determination is, of course, one of those aspects that might be really much difficult for member states to understand and accept the concepts. Like we also have to work with the political willingness of member states and understanding what does it mean. We really much hear many times in the UN UN setting that the indigenous right to self-determination is contradicting the member states' right to sovereignty. But of course, that's not the case. But I think that the understanding and interpretation of member states are really not yet there where our mindset is. So I really think that gap needs to be narrowed down in order to push forward. And then again, coming from a region and a country where and a people where self-determination rights have been established to a certain extent. Somehow we have, coming from the Sami land, we have the Sami parliaments. Even though Sami parliaments are more maybe a participatory right instruments that doesn't have the maybe the governance in power and full right of self-determination. And just to give an example, how for example the declaration has been used. In the case of Finland, for example, we have the Sami parliament, and there is the national Finnish parliament decided the action, the law, the legislation on the Sami parliament, and in that specific legislation there are some elements of self-determination developed, but there are, for example, criteria of who can be involved with the political engagement of the indigenous people, and currently those are decided by member states, not by indigenous people, and that is again one example on that there needs to be even more work done on building a strong understanding what is the self-determination. But us as a Samis, how we have been using that declaration under the self-determination aspect is one example, and for example in this specific case in Finland on the electoral roll issue of the Sami parliament, we have been using the declaration, the Article 3, 8, and 33, that are establishing the right to self-determination, self-identification, self-criteria establishment for identifying your members in your people. And from 2011 we have been using this, and actually I would say that the declaration has been crucial for our fight, because without the declaration there would not be those specifically 3 articles that has been setting guidance on how to deal with the indigenous self-determination. And now in 2019, in February, the Human Rights Commission made a decision against Finland, heavily relying to the declaration, Articles 3, 8, and 33, on right and self-determination. And that's why, if you think about what kind of achievements the declaration have been providing, it's been helpful for our case, because it has guided the Human Rights Commission that is interpreting the ICCPR to take into account the indigenous side of the self-determination that is part of the political rights.
Yeah, no, that's the exactly point what I wanted to say when it comes to the self-determination rights, like to elaborate it, the right to determining what you really want to do as indigenous peoples, like you have it. So if I see the context from our region, Asia region, so there's the challenge, like the interpretation of the self-determination rights. So it comes with a political willingness, most of the cases. So this is nothing about like the separatist movement or extremism, this and that. It is more about, as an indigenous persons or indigenous peoples, the community, how you decide your own political status. Self-determination, that's the thing. That's the point. This is nothing about actually contradictory. So that's why, of course, UNDRIP always now refer as a framework in every country. And you see the key elements here. I mentioned the Article 3 of the UNDRIP. It is nothing new. It's just copy pasted from the other international human rights instruments.
Yeah.
So if you see also most of those international conventions ratified by the member states. So it is actually officially legally binding thing.
Yeah.
Nothing new. So this is the point what I wanted to mean about the self-determination, that actually, even though it is connected all your governance, your territorial rights, identity, culture, tradition, whatever.
No, it starts with self-determination.
Yes.
You cannot talk about land rights before you talk about self-determination.
Yeah, this is why I'm saying that your self-determination is the foundation here.
It's the backbone. It's everything. Yeah.
So here the point is now the political motivation, whether it is actually working now or not, whether we are very much related to another direction on this issue, like the discussion on the issue of recognizing self-determination rights, whatever it is, or we are just approaching, like these days I see like mostly like so many indigenous NGOs are grown, like project-based activities, particularly in the third world countries.
Yeah.
Whether it is just a project-initiated things, how it's actually connect with your self-determination rights, even though it comes to project initiatives. So this is the point. It is nothing about against anything. This is all about your political rights, determining your rights.
Yeah.
Even in the FPIC, my observation, think about your community itself. Pre-prior informed consent. These terminologies we are just now talking about, right? It exists since before even when the civilization started. Look at your community, observe it. My observations growing to the community, this decision-making process, this is all about the APIC thing in the community. It's even, a community, they just don't put this is in the way it is narrated now in the article. But the practice itself, even before writing the APIC things, it's there. Indigenous peoples practice it since before. So that's why I'm saying this is it's the same history that started the civilization. It is there with the indigenous peoples. So this is the thing. This is also the political elements. How you can apply it. How can you use it? This is the self-determination again. Your decision-making process.
Yeah. Well, here's a question for you, Dan. A little bit of context. I remember you both were there as well. After World Conference, we had an evaluation meeting in Chiang Mai, Thailand. I think it was November 2014. And I remember Alyssa May, she Skyped in, and she shared like the first question, the main question that a lot of people asked over the website was, what is the UN Declaration? Like, they didn't know that there was a Declaration of Rights of Indigenous Peoples. The two of you, myself included, and everybody that we've been working with at the UN level, are very fluent in the UN Declaration. How would you then explain to a 6-year-old what the UN Declaration is? And because we all know that like there are approximately 370 million Indigenous peoples walking around across the planet. Ideally, everyone should be like intimate with their rights. I think what I'm trying to say is that's been on my mind the whole time. Actually, that we can talk about everything, but you said it yourself. Like, we need strong indigenous mechanisms. Yes, but we also need strong indigenous peoples that are very fluent in the rights of indigenous peoples. And I think in that case that there's also, just my one man's opinion, that there's also responsibility for us, not just for the states. It's a responsibility for us to educate and build the capacities of indigenous peoples and non-indigenous peoples on our rights. And I think, like what you said before, is that I think that's what I think Professor James and I said it as well, that the rights of indigenous peoples are not new rights. Like the rights that we should have had all along. Exactly. And I think that's a misconception out there, that, especially from states, that when you talk about the Declaration of Rights of Indigenous Peoples, when you talk about rights of indigenous peoples, it's something new. But it's not. It's actually not. And another thought of mine is that, and I think it goes back to when ILO Convention 169 came up to a vote in Finland, and it got voted down with an overwhelming, not support, but against it. And I saw on social media a lot of Samis. I had a lot of empathy with the Samis, because they were with on the Finnish side about you really wanted to have ILO 169 ratified through the Finnish government. But what they said, well, the Finnish government is not respecting our rights to self-determination. That's what most people said. And then not a light bulb, but in my mind, I was like, well, that's the thing. You don't ask for your right to self-determination. You claim it in some ways. You don't necessarily need. Of course, it would be helpful to have 169 in your ratified, but I think what the both of you are also trying to go towards is that self-determination is the backbone. So you need to build that first, make that strong, and claim that right to self-determination. As it's like you said, it's the bone structure for lands, territories, resources, education, healthcare, even sports, things like that. I don't know what I was going to ask, but it's...
Yeah, but I mean, I would agree that to this extent that, of course, you would have to have your own institution that would be able to build those rights. I mean, there's little point trying to give education or implement the educational rights if you don't have your own peoples, your own individuals that are willing and capable of doing it in your own way. You building your own education systems and exercising those, and so that they in practice would happen. Of course, you would have to have a certain kind of collective movement that people concerned would have a certain kind of view or thinking that how we are supposed to do this. But of course, the right to self-determination is one of the most tricky and hard ones for the member states also. So in order to solely work for self-determination rights and building your own institutions might take some time. And imagine different situations in the world. I mean, I can fully understand that IPs are pushing for rights in every aspect of the rights.
Yeah.
It's of course important, but yeah, the right to self-determination is of course crucial. But I think one of the ways how to achieve that in the end is building an understanding and knowledge within the member states. It's true that we need in indigenous peoples. We need individuals that are willing to work on the matter, use their time to get familiar with the declaration, so that they are having the possibilities to promote the declaration for state officials and everybody that are concerned, your own people also. But adding information and knowledge, understanding within the member states, state officials and politicians, allows you to get little by little forward. I mean, one example, I have been now talking about the National Action Plan on implementing the declaration on a national level in Finland for 5 years. Honestly, I think that there are a lot of people still among my own people, but especially on the government side also, that are not really fully understanding the in-depth length of the declaration. I'm happy that New Zealand is the first country in the world that is now, to my eyes, really trying to make the national action plan on implementing the declaration. I hope that someday Finland will show political willingness to do that also, but at least for the last 4 years, I've seen that Finland, even though it's supposed to be one of those countries where human rights are highly taken into consideration, is still really slow on actually doing the stuff on the ground. We have the huge debate on the electoral roll, and it's one of examples that self-determination rights are not respected and implemented in Finland. But also in a wider aspect, we still lack the political willingness and understanding from the member state side to start those processes. But I hope that the example from New Zealand, and if it goes well, will trigger more political willingness and understanding. But one thing is also that not just the state officials that don't know about these matters, we also really much have to have the dialogues with those individuals that are in a governmental structure responsible for human rights and implementing those. Because in my experience, I have seen, for example, in Finland that those responsible state officials are lacking understanding on implementing the declaration, making the national action plans, even though they are responsibility for human rights, even though they have a general good understanding on how to implement human rights on a national level.
You are right, but what I want to also add with you, I think the UNDRIP, after the adoption, Bolivia was the first country who actually incorporated with the national constitution, UNDRIP, and also a few Latin American countries took as a guiding framework recognizing indigenous people's rights. That's what research documents say to some extent. However, I agree with all the points what you said. You might be agree to all this what is happening at this moment in terms of the promotional activities of the UNDRIP. But what I will say, the most important things to recognize the indigenous people's rights or self-determination, whatever it is, and also to take away all this misconception. The most important part is the having effective dialogue between the government and indigenous peoples. This is very important to create the space, that create the space of the dialogue and having the dialogue, and also to overcome the challenges. Dialogue is the most important thing, and also at the same time, when it comes to dialogue, there are the misinterpretation. Like for example, all the government officials, they are not coming from the human rights background, or they are not coming from the legal background, and most of them also don't understand, or they are not clear about this indigenous people's rights.
Yeah.
And when it comes in the dialogue in a good faith, this also a good way of processing understanding indigenous people's political issue, their political rights, their needs. So their needs is the UNDRIP, is the one that needs to implementation.
Yeah.
So that's the thing, like unless you don't have the space of a dialogue, participatory and also effective and a meaningful dialogue, then you will not achieve it. And that's where the government also, I think, I feel government should consider this one, not excluding the indigenous peoples, but to see how they can include more in the political processes, policy development processes for their rights.
Yeah.
This is also because if you see the political situation, the vulnerability, there's the indigenous peoples, almost all the countries, whether this is developed countries or developing countries or non-developed countries, somehow indigenous peoples are the most vulnerable, marginalized in political space or political rights.
Yeah.
So that's the important part, to create the dialogue, to understand their situation. You know, the way they see the way they see their rights, their culture, their identity, their land, territory, traditional knowledge, whatever it is. So I would say that yes, this action plan, the integration of the constitution, this and those are very good elements. But where it is still impossible to see or to encourage the member states, how really can create a space for a dialogue or discussions between the government and indigenous peoples to achieve their political rights and the UNDRIP.
Yeah.
So that's the most important thing. And today, this will be my also opinion, that we should think of to engage more the government, to have a very constructive discussion with the government indigenous peoples, and also at the same time realizing indigenous peoples' political attention by the policymakers at the national level. International level, we have enough already. I mean, of course, we need a strong mechanism still there.
Okay.
We need it in the UN level. We need one strong mechanism. Until now, even though now it's more than 12 years achieving this UNDRIP, we still don't have actually indigenous peoples' participations in the decision-making level of the United Nations. So that's also affect to the policy implementations in many member states countries.
Yeah.
Because you know, the United Nations is also considered as a guardian of many governments in terms of their some decisions. Right? So this also matters, giving the opportunity to indigenous peoples in the decision-making level of the United Nations. For example, in order to analyze analyze the achievement or assessment of the UNDRIP, or taking forward all these processes in a coordinated manner to all the UN mechanisms relating to indigenous peoples, UN Secretary General can appoint one Deputy Secretary General.
Yeah.
Deputy Secretary General for the indigenous peoples.
Yeah.
That's how you can also, see decentralizing. And that way you can also have, there are many aspects you can do that. So this is the international level, I think, important, engaging in various avenues. At the national level is the most important part is dialogue. This participation, this dialogue, space, having a dialogue between indigenous peoples and communities is important. Understanding the political issue of indigenous peoples.
Yeah, well, on that point of the Secretary General appointing someone, well, we asked at the World Conference, of course, a high-level official to at least to be leading the system-wide action plan, and what we got was the head of DESA, right? To be the.
No, I think it should be from the indigenous community.
No, that's what I'm saying.
I mean, no matter where it's coming.
What we wanted was that high-level official that would be promoting the rights of indigenous peoples or indigenous peoples in UN policies. But what we got was the head of DESA. So I think in that sense, like I think that's one of the outcomes of the World Conference that I was not shocked about, but that I was not happy with. That's not, at least that's not what we wanted.
But yeah, but like the international level, of course, is a whole another game. You have different forums, different issues going, and you know, the enhanced participation discussion in the UN most likely is the most hardest one.
At this moment?
Well, but I would say that it will be more difficult than actually the World Conference process was.
Yes.
The negotiation process.
Yeah.
This is going to be, and is already, more harder. So we need really a collective effort from indigenous peoples also, and I hope that in the near future we see even more indigenous peoples coming from all 7 regions taking part for this work, because I really see that we are lacking even whole regions from this process, but I've been positively thinking that there are more and more engaging people for this process that is one of the most hardcore processes in the UN for our rights to be developed. But going back to the national level, I mean, we were talking about the same. I mean, in order to build understanding and political will within the member states to implement it, you need to have a dialogue, of course. But one thing that I think is crucial and what I have what I have faced in my work is that there might be different interpretations of the declaration. Now, what will you do if the interpretations are locked, so that there's no room for movement through the dialogue? And there, for example, the UNDRIP and its new mechanism is crucial, as it has the opportunity to interpret the declaration articles. What does it mean? And it can even transform that interpretation, that what does it mean in this national context, national legislation systems. So that's why I think that the UNDRIP is a really important mechanism, and I think that the indigenous peoples are willing to use that even more in the near future, and might be even putting a lot of focus more for UNDRIP, as it has the opportunity to firstly build up and facilitate the dialogue, because most of the member states where indigenous peoples are living, there is really no or really weak accessibility for dialogue. So UNDRIP can build up that bridge, that there is room for a dialogue, there is space for that, and then it can be helping for interpreting the declaration. So what are the interpretations of the declaration? So that is, I think that building the political will through dialogue needs some safeguards also, in order to get the correct understandings within the member states and state officials.
Yeah, this. Yeah, you are right. UNDRIP, of course, here in the if you see the indigenous people simulates mechanisms in the UN system, UNDRIP is the one directly taking the UNDRIP as a key area of their work. So this, I agree with your points, and Again, the interpretation of the UNDRIP also, of course, contextualizing at the local level in terms of the language wise to understand, giving the message to the community like what is UNDRIP. That's also important. Our indigenous people also needs to understand what is there.
Exactly.
In the Asia region, Asia Indigenous Peoples Pact, they actually translated into local language to different national languages in order to give the sense what is there, and also had this training manual about the UNDRIP, what is there, how you really can understand going through point by point on the UNDRIP issue. So I think this kind of promotional activities are already there. I mean, I'll try, but as you said, one thing at the national level, the more about this creating the space or trying to get the space for the dialogue, and this is the most important thing. And I also feel that this is the area we actually in the future can work on that. Of course, I don't know when we'll get Deputy Secretary General who will coordinate all the work of indigenous peoples at the UN level.
Yeah.
But I'm optimistic.
I have a question for you.
Yes.
Tomo sends a question in. So, he would like to hear your thoughts on the direction of the global indigenous movement. What moment are you in right now, and where do you want it to go in the next 12 years? So let's start with the.
It's a good question. I mean,
Yeah.
I think that there's different kind of aspects happening now. I think that the generation is changing. There is those ones that have been working for indigenous rights on international level are sadly getting old, retiring, and so there are a lot of new generation coming up. So there is the movement of change on how the advocacy work and who are doing that. There might be some gaps still on building those capacities for the new generation to understand what has happened, and then how to work currently, how they have the old generation work currently, and how to work in the future. So that is something that I guess will be put focus more for the next 12 years, I would say. But that's a good question. I think the movement will focus on two things: the national levels, how to use the international level to push for the declaration to be implemented on a national level, and then another one is how to build the participation and self-determination rights on international level more in practice. Let's say if, for example, in 5 years we will get the enhanced participation. What will that mean? That means that we will have to have representatives that are capable of doing everyday diplomacy in UN, participate every day in meetings relevant for indigenous peoples, representing their peoples. So it is a huge.
Are we ready to do that?
Yeah, that is something
as a movement.
That is something that the capacities needs to be built up.
Okay.
But then again, let's look at from the history point. Were the first or the second, first and the second generation ready to start advocating indigenous rights in the UN?
Yeah.
No, they started from one place and moved and built up the movement from there.
Yeah.
So I think that would be the same also happening if the indigenous representation in the UN will be developed.
Okay.
State of the movement.
I actually thought some points, but I forgot what. No. But anyway, very briefly.
No, not briefly. Just like say what you want.
I agree with your point, Thomas, what you just mentioned. But from my point of view, I just want to add with you that if you analyze the historical facts that indigenous peoples involved with the UN processes, that is all about the process related to the political movement on the ground.
Yeah.
So the political movement is basically the movement on the rights of self-determination. How can we keep intact our land, territories, and resources? Basically that's the key point, right? So then, over the years that the movement building had happened, and they had a negotiation, all this, and now this level. So now for the next liner, the important part is that when you say the capacity, when you say the knowledge, experience, and skill there involved, how our also to see the leadership emerging, regional wise. So that's why what is important for me in the future, in order to build a greater political rights movement among the indigenous peoples in terms of achievement of the UNDRIP, is to see the area of distributive leadership building. Distributive leadership means it is not, from my point of view, this is not for only one country or one region. Try to build indigenous people's leadership, whether this is political or whatever, every country, every subcontinent and the continents, so that they can contribute in their political means of their political rights, whatever rights involved on the indigenous people issues.
Yeah.
Until or unless we don't build a distributive leadership, or until or unless our elders don't realize it to build leadership in the country level, the local level, connecting to the international process, the local process to international, it will be very difficult to achieve our rights movement. So the movement, if I want to see in the future, it is basically involving how much the capacity we are building or our elders are building for the next liner, this distributive leadership. So this is the most important thing. So that's my point.
Yeah.
So that's what I will see. Like if you build the leadership, next 5 years or next 12 years, and I still believe that you will achieve something there. The most important thing is the leadership, building the leadership capacity.
Yeah.
Yeah, given the example now, you see the even now in the global level, our leadership. So those who were involved since the 60s, 70s process, so they are the ones still guiding us in many ways, right? Some of them,
In some cases, yeah.
Some cases. So the thing is, what is important now, the more engagement in the capacity building process of the leadership, and more strategic thinking for the distributive leadership.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is the most important part. And if we can build this one, the leadership capacity, I think at least some of the elements of the UNDRIP will achieve by 2025. I mean the 2030. At least some. I'm not saying that all of the UNDRIP what the provisions will achieve, but at least some of these we may achieve it.
Yeah.
Right? Those who are really needs, basic needs.
Yeah. Okay.
So that's how I project. I'm optimistic in that area. But most important thing again, how actually we or our elders are projecting for the future leadership, distributive leadership.
Yeah.
It will depend on that.
Yeah, I would agree that definitely there needs to be planned processes how we work within implementing the human rights. Of course, that is crucial. But I think that there is tools building up, and now the next 12 years also is about implementing those tools, using those tools. If we like compare from From the beginning of 2000, there wasn't that much tools what to use. You had to build up the tools on international level, building the declaration, building the World Conference outcome document. So there are practical tools what the indigenous peoples can use in their national contexts, like the national action plans and those. So you can use those, and there I fully agree with you. Then in order to use those and put in places those tools on a national level, you need to have distributed leadership and capacities about the declaration and about the strategies and about the thinking behind of these tools, how to use those tools. So that is of course one of the crucial elements what we need to also focus ourselves, because there's no automatic happening or actions that are working towards that. We have to build and strengthen and work with that specific aspect ourselves. The leadership comes from the grassroots, from the communities, bringing those issues, pushing those issues, understanding those issues, and then interpreting also the declaration and building them to proposals forward.
Yeah.
So definitely.
Yeah, for me, in terms of the movement, I find it, first of all, I find it very hard to predict things, because you don't, the only thing that I can do is like look like a little bit ahead, but not like further ahead. And if I'm looking at the movement right now, it's either traditional knowledge that is keeping us occupied, climate change, and sustainable development goals. I think if you look at the meetings, the themes of the meetings that we're participating in, it's mostly either one of these three. Right now, this is my intuition that everything is focused on the sustainable development goals. And well, I do have to say, like, I'm not very intimate with the SDGs. I was involved in some way in the negotiation leading up to it, but not right now in the implementation phase. But I do get the sense that like everything goes into SDGs right now, and I always have that fear that if you look to the left, you don't know what's going on the right. You know, so I'm very skeptic about, like, all right, we're all focusing on SDGs right now. What are they trying to sneak past us on our right? Is it traditional knowledge? Not climate change, but is it traditional knowledge? And I get the feeling, and this is like my gut feeling, is that like it's not that they're very interested in our knowledge, but like what can be monetized is genetic resources, if it's land-based or marine genetic resources. And I think that is one of the frontiers that I'm feeling that we should be very careful about. And that's also where the UN Declaration comes in, that we need to make sure that those safeguards are in place. So every time when traditional knowledge comes into play, when they start talking about traditional knowledge, and again, I don't like the word traditional knowledge, that we need to, like, at the very second they say that, we say, all right, Declaration of Rights of Indigenous Peoples, safeguard, like build that, build that fence around it. Otherwise, you get. Just to give you an example, in the negotiations on oceans, the BBNJ Treaty, biodiversity beyond national jurisdiction. So right now, what they're trying to, one of the elements of what they're looking at is to have the involvement of the WTO, and they're also looking into indigenous knowledge as means of safeguarding biodiversity within the high seas. You know, so I don't like that link, our knowledge and the WTO. So that's why we need to make it a point that like, if you talk about knowledge of indigenous peoples, I like that term much better than traditional knowledge. Sidestep, I think, like, do you actually know where traditional knowledge came from? Because I get the feeling that it is a term that was imposed on us. That, like,
well, I think it's a Western way to describe knowledge that has been used by individuals and peoples due to the time.
Yeah,
because
but it's not relevant,
knowledge
right?
and tradition. Yeah, but I mean, yeah, if we call it indigenous knowledge or traditional knowledge, the function is in the end the same. So I don't think that. Yeah, we can of course put focus on that. Yeah, but I fully agree with you that it seems to be so that a lot of indigenous peoples are putting focus on SDGs and climate work and that's of course important. But coming back, what Binota was also saying that strengthening our rights to self-determination is maybe on the right side if a lot of the indigenous peoples are looking on the left side.
Right. So that's my fear as well.
Yes.
That if you look at the SDGs the whole time and you water down, to a certain extent, the right to self-determination to the point that you can't even recognize it anymore. So basically, I know that it's not right, but if I look ahead, it's mostly in fear, and what might happen if we don't watch out. And I think that's also very important that what you said, that we need to duplicate ourselves. Because right now, if you look at the movement, it's a vacuum. The experts on the rights are mostly in the movement, and I think that we have a responsibility to educate, build the capacities of others through whatever means you want to, but it's immoral to want to be the one person that knows everything, because you're representing a people and you need to build the capacities of your peoples, right? So I think in that sense, I think that we're lacking a little bit still as a movement, making sure that everybody knows what we're doing.
Yes, exactly.
Transparency.
Information sharing, coordination.
Yes.
Coordination, yes. I mean, I fully agree. I mean, one good example is that here, where we are talking about human rights resolution, where is self-determination rights, where is the enhanced participation. We are 5 indigenous representatives here trying to negotiate and push forward our aspirations. There's not that much, and even five of us coming from 3 regions, maybe basically. So we're lagging even 4 regions. The majority of the regions are not here currently, today, during these weeks. So this is one of the examples that really need to try to secure ways and means for indigenous peoples to participate, because I fully understand it's not easy to come here without funding and opportunities to accreditate yourself and everything. And enhanced participation is an important topic. There are a lot of indigenous representatives that are following closely the process, are actively engaging, but might not have the opportunities always to participate. But the reality is that if you want to get something done, or something at least pushed in a United Nations framework, you need to be in those meetings where the resolution, where the decisions are negotiated. Because speaking from outside of the room, it's really hard to affect what is happening in the room. So you have to be, and you have to engage and put yourself in those rooms where the movement could happen.
Yeah, that's true. But I am coming to the point, the SDG. From my point of view and my analysis, this is government agenda to divert the movement you have at the grassroots level by different groups who hold their political rights. So now you have how many goals?
I'm going to steal that from you.
17 goals. So when I said diverting or hindering the grassroots movement, this is this includes to the indigenous people's human rights movement too. So if you see the now 17 goals, all this and that, with 169 indicators, that is basically coming with huge amounts of these goals and indicators in order to keep people, the organizations busy, sourcing out the funding, stay with your project, with your activities. Then you don't have the time to think your political movement issue, your human rights issue. Even though those are government may say, or some NGOs or organization may say this is part of the human rights, but the key idea of the movement, the human rights movement or indigenous people's rights movement, political rights movement, are somehow it's diverted. We can in somehow, because then you are coming with your NGOs have to survive, or you have to take the money, right? So you have to compromise.
Yeah.
Then you cannot talk about the sensitivity issue, the political rights issue. So that's how actually the government or the UN system took the strategy to destabilize or dismantle the grassroots people's movement, including indigenous people's movement. That's my analysis. If you see.
Yeah.
If you now, for example, now you see all the NGOs, all the indigenous people. I mean, if you see the indigenous people organizations, NGOs, all those, all are talking about the SDGs. They are very busy with the project proposal, submission, this and that. Isn't it? You see, they are talking about it as a huge issue. And then where it is like the coming from the community, their needs, their aspiration, like the political rights, their right to self-determination, their local needs.
Yeah.
It's not the one actually focusing on this SDG. This is all about the NGOs for their project.
Yeah.
If you see whether developed or developing countries. And that's how also, like once, so that's how the strategy, then you are diverting your thinking, your ideology, your idea to other side instead of this political rights or human rights issue. The core moments that you need to do.
Yeah.
The social mobilization, community mobilization, that's somehow you're diverting, hindering with this kind of projects.
Yeah.
And also the so-called saying that achievement. What do we achieve from the Millennium Development Goals? Look at the indigenous people's situation.
Yes.
Practically, indigenous people achieve nothing.
Exactly.
And now they are talking about the SDG. And one of the core issues now saying peace, justice, and strong institutions. This is just like one kind of hindering your ideas of having the strong institution as indigenous peoples. For example, practically indigenous peoples own strong institutions by themselves.
Yeah.
They have the strongest, very accountable, transparent decision-making process. Indigenous peoples are the only community who are peace lover, who has this justice system. The traditional justice systems acknowledged by every single person of the community. It's not it.
Yeah.
If you see the justice system, if you see the institution system, we have indigenous peoples, even though some countries, most of the cases this is informal, but they have the strong institutions that they do. The traditional system of the political institutions, all decision-making process. See, so now the SDG, how will they do? They will write in the paper service and the lip service, and this is all good, this and that. Then your issues are diverted to other issues.
Yeah.
Your key, the conceptual thought of the political rights, then it's diverted.
Yeah.
It will be no longer there. Because you are talking the goals, indicators, achievement.
Yeah.
And your achievement, self-determination rights, the terminology itself disappear.
Yes.
Yes.
So that's how the strategy,
Yeah.
if I see. So our leadership also have to think about, I don't know, of course they are much more experienced, knowledgeable. I will say that our current generation also need to think about that.
Yeah, because you're talking about leadership,
Yeah.
which includes you, Tuomas, and myself as well.
I don't know. Yeah, of course there are.
Yeah.
So every single persons who are actively engaged in the process
Yes, exactly.
at the local, national, international level, I think they have to think about it.
I do think that we need to look critically at like how are we engaging and what are we engaging, and if it's still contributes to the political movements that we have, and why we are actually participating at the United Nations level. And like in terms of the SDGs, like again, I don't have a lot of knowledge about that, but I do get the feeling that like the only peoples or groups that are how should I say it, benefiting from it actually are those that are doing the projects, and it's not like the movement at large, the Indigenous peoples at large. So at least that's what I'm feeling. I'm desperate for someone to step up and tell me otherwise. But right now, all the evidence that I see is in my favor. It contributes to my
You
feeling.
see the example, indigenous peoples organizations in the developing countries itself fighting for the project.
Yeah.
When we talk about the conflicting events among our indigenous peoples now in the organizational base, fighting for the project, and this is because of all these kind of things. Government is happy, okay, they are dividing themselves, so let it be. So that's good for them.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. But what comes to SDGs, and I also have to say that I haven't followed that thoroughly those process.
I also don't feel what I say.
because our priority, the Sami Parliament has decided their priority list, and the SDGs is not one of those currently. So that's one of the reasons why I haven't followed that much. But I do see the point to a certain extent why indigenous peoples are heavily engaging in that process. But the engagement might come with few specific reasons, though. But I mean, if we talk about poverty, how do you take poverty away from the world? The SDGs are and the 17 goals are targets how to build policies, how to achieve these set goals. In order to achieve those goals, you have to build policy, and indigenous people affecting those policy decisions would allow, opportunities for indigenous peoples to for example, take and prevent poverty, and because indigenous peoples are the most marginalized peoples in all of the world. So it is somehow a tool try to affect for the policy decisions that will guide all of the member states how to take away poverty, how to build peace, stronger institutions, and so on. So yeah, that's that is that. But what I do agree that it puts us in one specific field and put us to try to achieve something.
Yeah.
But the rights of indigenous peoples are full rights. So therefore, for example, working from a rights-based approach is really much in need and needed, because it doesn't touch about one specific narrative of one topic. They're they're big, issues.
Yeah.
So that's why working all over the UN is of course important.
Yeah.
But the human rights and building the rights to self-determination, they will allow us to implement some of the issues back home. If we have our own institutions, our own societies.
No, it again depends your government position or
of course, but
political willingness.
Of course, because but you have to build those, like we were talking before here.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, it's. I think that we should zoom out and be critical, and, for example, see the SDGs as a tool and not as a goal, and then just go all in, but as a tool to safeguard the right to self-determination, making sure that is safeguarded, that is still strong, that is not watered down. I think that's how we should look at all the tools that are out there, all the processes that are out there. Yes, they affect us, so we should engage, but not on the expense of the right to self-determination, and making sure that the UN Declaration is reflected as a safeguard.
Yes, but let's see. Do we have some questions? We have promised for the five people there to give questions.
No, there is. Oh yeah. By the way, there's a question if you can do a shout out for the. So today there's the 50-year anniversary of the Dutch Center for Indigenous Peoples. They're holding it right now in Holland. So like if you like congratulate the Dutch Center for Indigenous Peoples. So we could do that.
Yes.
I was looking at his phone. In terms of that, there's a video that's shared on how the UNDRIP has been instrumental with concrete examples from Drumbeat Media. I think when you look at the state of the movement and you look at the declaration, one thing that I keep in the back of my mind, and also I always have with me, is something that a lot of Indigenous peoples are not using. And I'm not talking about the UN Declaration. I'm talking about the Alta document.
Questions come. Big question, I guess.
Oh, so like your thoughts about implementation of the Alta document?
Well, the Alta document is the globally agreed position. So I'm not seeing in that sense how you are phrasing the question, because I think it's in our, at least in our policy work and our targeting work and our advocacy work, it's the basic grounds that we have to check that this is in line with the outcome document, because we have agreed to that. So there is a basic kind of...
I think that a lot of people don't know that, actually, that we should... I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I think that a lot of people need to know that it is a consensus document of the global movement, and that we need to see that as a checklist, as in whatever we do, make sure that is in line with the Alta outcome document. I had experiences of like people trying to come up with new targets, new principles, and everything else, and I just said, well, look at the Alta document. Well, you can use that as a model. You can use language from that. And if I see that in one process, then God knows how many people do that in different processes, and you get conflicting views and conflicting positions. Actually. And so I think, as next to the declaration, we should be using the Alta document as well. So I think, sorry for phrasing it weirdly, but I think that is what I'm trying to say. How do you see the Alta document? Are there people using the document, and how could people use that document?
I mean, I agree with that. That there is a lot of need to strengthen the capacities of indigenous peoples. Let's say the movement that what we have already targeted and agreed upon. I mean, for example, the interactive hearings regarding the enhanced participation showed that the global position of indigenous peoples was not maybe well known among all, but of course there was always the need and right for freely building your own ideas, targets, and things. But within our work, our international work is in line with the Alta document.
We are far behind focusing the Alta outcome document. I mean, if you see the Asia regional perspective and my observation, I think this is because of the situation is so diverse and multiple dimensions that you have, like political situation of indigenous people. So it's very difficult to say exactly how you frame the Alta outcome document as your working guidelines there for indigenous people's rights. But definitely that's a global statement, and Asia region contributed there, and it's I will say this is the real indigenous people's document and the globally adopted one. So in the future, perhaps it will be one of a guidance document for indigenous peoples, activists in the rights movement or whatever is in the negotiation process. But the one system-wide action plan, it's also, I think, how much it is following up by the indigenous organizations, that the system-wide action plan prepared by the Permanent Forum, UNDRIP, I guess.
DESA, yeah.
So how that's actually reflected or grounded to achieve it at the national level. That I think that's also matters.
Don't you think, well, about the swaps, like, don't you think that the swaps were like drafted like very quick, like very fast?
Yeah, they were done quite fast.
Yeah, like I didn't
negotiated quite fast. They also.
Who negotiated them?
Well, the indigenous people.
There are indigenous people in there?
They were
Okay.
involved.
Yeah, this is because interagency support group, of course, all these UN agencies, and those who are implementing project with the indigenous people organizations in many countries in different regions. I think they are one of those, along with the UN Parliament, this Parliament from Secretariat and the members, those really contributed there. That's my understanding by saying. The document, it's a quite good document, even though it's like summary one. It's a good summary and focus area that build consensus among the UN agencies. Now the question is, in order to implement this, how much money or resources they are actually putting forward there.
Right. Yeah.
And also how much they are willing to share precise information about their work.
Exactly.
We get the general report, but that doesn't specify the details that have been discussed. And then again, how the interagency support group can inform about their work if they're not sharing the details of their work.
Is the voluntary fund, because you're on the board of the voluntary fund, like, is the voluntary fund participating in the interagency support group, or is that totally different?
No.
Okay.
It's totally different. It's, I think, the UN agencies, and Permanent Forum.
UNDRIP, probably?
Permanent Forum is the one leading.
Okay.
And, OHR is part of there. And then, I'm not sure whether UNDRIP is there, or I'm not sure whether Special Rapporteur is
They are
also
there.
there.
UNDRIP is there.
But the UN Voluntary Fund is not there. That's the point. See, in the UN mechanisms on the rights of indigenous peoples, UN Voluntary Fund is the oldest mechanism.
Yeah, okay.
And UN Voluntary Fund is the only mechanism also, because its nature of the work contributed building all these international processes for indigenous peoples. The outcome of the UN Voluntary Fund contributions, it's huge. Look at the UNDRIP achievement, UN Permanent Forum establishment, the lobby advocacy for the Special Rapporteur, and also the establishment of the UNDRIP and the World Conference. Where are not there?
Yeah.
Voluntary Fund contributed a lot. But in terms of this kind of things, I don't know. That's also, being a board member, of course, I can't say very details anything here.
No, sure, yeah.
But my question also here. This is also one of the body who also deal with the indigenous people issues, and this body also deals with civil society and private partnership, all this, and their organizations, in order to engage the indigenous peoples to build their capacity. Not only the resource-wise, they also their capacity to contribute to the community, like understanding law, policy, all this and that.
Yeah.
So now this is the point. Like, I don't know why UN Voluntary Fund are not invited to the interagency support group. They are also part of the experts, but they can also contribute in the discussion. Expert or intellectual contribution, they can make it. But I don't see actually they have it. I mean, they are invited. At least this is my second term of the fund. I have not seen any invitation we received from the interagency support group, or even the coordination meeting that the UN mechanism of the indigenous peoples.
Yeah.
Very recently, the expert mechanisms, UNDRIP, they invite voluntary fund. I think this year Permanent Forum invited during the session of the Permanent Forum. But my again opinion is why they are not in a formal structure. Why voluntary fund is not included in the formal structure in the coordination meeting of this UN mechanism on the rights of indigenous peoples? Because they might have a views also how can effectively engage the beneficiaries of the voluntary fund in the work of the special rapporteur, in the work of the expert mechanism, in the implementation of the recommendations of the Permanent Forum. How they can contribute. It could be a discussion.
Yeah.
They can share their views, because in our meeting we also discuss all this area of intervention. So this is also, I am also a little, when I came first time as a board member in 2015, I was really surprised to see voluntary fund is not part of this coordination meeting. Okay. And then second time is also, we discussed, and then I think UNDRIP is the first who invited voluntary fund in their meeting. And this year I think Permanent Forum in New York they invited officially, but not again when they have this back to back in the intersessional meetings, and that I don't see any invitation that we had in the past. So this is the point. I still feel no matter what is there, but they are also coming from the indigenous background. They are also somehow expert. They have also knowledge. They have a lot of things to contribute in the discussion. So they should also be invited.
Okay.
They can really contribute. I think all in terms of strategizing the effective engagement of the beneficiaries at the local level, because our beneficiary mostly coming from the local level.
Yeah.
So some of my views and also my observation. This is nothing to do with the fund, but that's all my personal views. Yeah. This is what I
understood.
See, I feel that in the future also, Permanent Forum, UNDRIP, all should consider this to formalize the engagement of the UN Voluntary Fund in the coordination meeting, in the work of the UN system together, collectively.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good. But going back to the topic of our discussion, the anniversary of the declaration.
So many things are how
yeah, we're jumping around a bit,
but I think that's good actually.
Yeah.
It's a shared thought. But yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, there was a question by in the chat that what we are going to do next after this interview or live session that we have, and it is the anniversary of the declaration, the 12th.
Oh boy. Okay.
So
hold on, I got a question for you though.
Okay.
All right, it's Tomo again. Following up on Thomas's point about meetings, since UN Declaration and indigenous peoples are gaining seats or need to be at so many international meetings and processes from intellectual property to oceans, how are the indigenous peoples responding to these opportunities and challenges?
That is the perfect question, and I think that is the question that should be globally thought. I just want to be honest. I'm not trying to be arrogant or anything, but I think that indigenous peoples are not fully thinking this matter. We have some strong institutions, organizations, North America, Asia, AIPP, one of those that I know a bit more, and South Americans, and we have institutions in every region and so on, and that is of course important. But how do we collectively and strategically participate to the UN different level of meetings representing the same goals and ideas what we do in some part of UN. We see that at least, and this is something that we try to think also within the Sami parliaments together, all of the three Sami parliaments. How do we coordinate? How do we work together within all the different frameworks of the UN with one common positions and so forth? And we work with that daily based. It's everyday work. It is not like that you can a couple of times in a year try to coordinate something, because coordinating positions and processes, we have every month there is one process. So you need to put effort and work on that, and we're trying to do that. But then again, we also have to involve and get better on it. But we are at least trying to. It's a focus. It's on our agenda. But what I don't see, and I don't know how the other regions, for example, are trying to do it. How are they coordinating their participation? I mean, I know that Asia has a good practice on having the pre-sessions or sessions where they prepare as a region to for example, Forum, UNDRIP, and those. And I think that is one of the good examples to all of the other regions. I don't know any of the other regions that would be so organized compared to Asia, that they have common meetings where they prepare their summit.
Can you explain a little bit what the preparatory process is of Asia?
Well, in our Asia regional preparatory process actually started in relation to the human rights mechanism.
Okay.
So over the years it has expanded the discussion on different issues. So again, when the regional level there are indigenous experts started engaging with different platforms, like for example CBD, COP, and or WIPO here. WIPO is not very much, but CBD we had a good engagement and also had this regional level preparatory meeting separately before. So that's where we discuss the issue, basically try to see who is familiar, who is engaged the process to continue. Like that's one. For example, CBD process, it was from the beginning in this areas, particularly the 8J, traditional knowledge issues, was the Georgie Carino from Tepteba at the time.
Yeah.
Since then, of course, Janila Simbang, they were involved. So, but at the same time, they had a good understanding, focus this area. And of course, we don't have very much expertise. We are very limited. The human resources in the region who can contribute. So we are still struggling in that case to cope with all these issues, emerging issues at the global level.
So yeah.
For
So you
But in the end, you guys are organizing your position,
Yeah.
coordinating.
No, that's
and,
that's
and,
true.
and putting up together
Yeah.
different positions from different people. So
Yeah,
that is something that I really think that
Yeah.
other regions should take into account and consider how they are coordinating the work. Because one example is here, we are only 3 regions present, 4 missing.
Yeah, that's true. What we also try to do, of course, when we organize this Asia Regional Preparatory Meeting, we can bring everyone there in a meeting. So what we do when we discuss in the meeting, we share the network, the listserv for the feedback points that they might have. For example, say the permanent forum, but this is the preparatory meeting group workshop result on that area. What are the elements need to be included or highlighted? So these kind of things, that's the practice happening.
And you meet in January? Is that when you do it?
It basically end of February or March, early March.
So before the permanent forum.
forum.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So during the permanent forum, there's the time decides for the permanent forum and UNDRIP. And this year, environment separated because Very recently, AIPP had the Asia regional meeting on environmental issues, so they have actually different platform divided already. So Asia region very recently developed this indigenous knowledge platform network.
Yeah.
So this they will work on that field, particularly the traditional knowledge, indigenous knowledge, this and that. So see the engagement level of now that we are trying to be in the future in different international processes.
Yeah.
Climate change is already there through the UNFCCC. It's Asia regional participation engagement. It is there.
Yeah.
But for and also the CBD was there, but now doing more formalized way, like doing this indigenous knowledge platform network,
Yeah.
for example, or the one AIPP contributing this local communities platform in the CCC.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how we are trying to see them engage the indigenous experts from the region, from different countries. Not necessarily they have to be member of AIPP. They could be a network members. They could be individual experts. But what AIPP, Asia Indigenous Peoples Package, Asia regional organizations trying to bring is that those experts should be included or taking part in all those thematic areas, so that the knowledge of the issues, at least will be raised what Asia think.
Yeah.
So this is more the regional thinking, not the individual or organization. It's
Right.
more the collective process and collective engagement, collective contribution.
I think from a Pacific point of view, we are the exact opposite of what you're doing, because right now it is, it's an email listserv, and it's about like who sends the most emails, and it's a bit of toxicity has like moved into that email group, at least from my perspective, from my point of view, and to the extent that a lot of people that are engaging or that want to engage don't engage anymore, because they see all those negative emails going back and forth, which makes coordinating amongst a region as the Pacific difficult, if not impossible, at least through an email. I think we had some in recent history. We had some meetings that we gathered. I think in the run-up to COP21, Indigenous peoples gathered. In the run-up to the World Conference, we had one meeting held in Sydney and one held and the COP21 was held in New Zealand. Other than that, like, it's difficult. Like, Asia is like one big landmass, so you can travel relatively easy. And Pacific is much more difficult. So you need to rely on email traffic, on ways of communicating online. So in terms of the technology is there, what I think what is missing right now is actually a good infrastructure, actually, to be able to discuss things and be respectful of each other. And right now it's not happening anymore. And the people actually, like, for example, there's like nomination election processes that are that works, at least relatively works, but is not good. It can be perfect, of course, but you need to make sure that it actually makes a representative of people, and the people that are doing the work that are actually capable of doing it. So I would like to see that within our region, at least, to be able, like you said, that when you go into negotiations, for example, at the Human Rights Council or at high level on oceans or whatever, that the Pacific actually is able to, like, all right, this is our position, this is what we need to do, and we can send or instruct a person that is capable to do it to do it. Because, like, flying from New Zealand which is relatively easy compared to Tuvalu or Vanuatu or Samoa, it's already hard. Like to Geneva for like a couple of days. So at least you need to be able to like have that infrastructure in place, and especially when the movement itself it's getting more sophisticated. We're talking about enhanced participation right now, so we're moving into more and more processes that affect us, because we're getting a hang of this system. We're mastering this system. So, like, from a specific point of view, that we need to step up now. We need to organize ourselves now, because if we don't do it, we're too late. I think because the movement is moving along, and we want to be part of that movement. Well, the other regions, of course, like the 6 other regions, like, well, where's the Pacific? And then we can't say, well, we don't have any money, or we don't have this, or X, Y, or Z. Like, you need to be able to, as a movement, as the 7 regions, like, you need to be able to move forward collectively. And I think that our contribution to that should be to organize ourselves first, and then contribute to the movement as well.
Yeah, that's true. But I mean, there's of course huge variations between the regions. I mean, my region, then again, is relevantly, let's say, easy compared to others, because we are region of concerning 2 peoples, even though living in 8 countries.
Yeah.
But with 2 peoples. So our coordination and position building is relevantly easy, and so words can be quite fast also. So of course there's really much different kind of regions, but one thing that I really much would like to highlight, what we need in as a global movement. When we're talking about the anniversary of declaration, I mean, there have been a lot of years, let's say 40 years, put on the work of getting the declaration and getting today's position. What we need is solidarity. What we need is it is good humor. What we need is acceptance between each others to work collectively. What I see that, and what has been disturbing for me, is that there seems to be more conflicts inside of the movement, and nobody is even behind the scenes talking about it. And now I'm even talking in a public setting. But I think that is something what we really cannot have. We are really small movement.
Yeah.
I mean, many places where I have been negotiating, many places it's only a handful of people doing the negotiations between and trying to, do the benefit for all the indigenous peoples. We cannot have that those individuals that are willing, that are having the capacity to participate, and are, putting their own time. And we need to respect that and be respectful between each other. We need to get rid of the toxicity that might be in the global movement, and we have to try to engage and accept everybody as they are, and gain the benefits, the positive benefits on having experts on different regions. We don't have the luxury of building those conflicts and toxicity even further. Our older generation did manage with that. We have to also manage with that, and we do not, and we cannot build the toxicity and allow it to dictate our work.
Exactly. Yeah.
Any final thoughts? I think that's a very good roundup, actually, of everything.
Yeah, my final thoughts, of course.
Or additional thoughts, whatever you want.
It can be the additional thoughts. It's our original platform that we think of, like having a collective always. It's very important, a collective voice. And currently, through the Asian Indigenous Peoples Pact, they are trying to bring the voices together on the issues of, for example, on the environment, SDG, and business and human rights. So all these things now in a discussion on the table. So to bring a collective voice all the time. but you need a lot of works behind on that. For example, research, study, analysis, putting it together in an advocacy format or your format that easily understandable by other parties. So, but this is still process trying to do. Of course, everyone will not be happy, or everyone is not happy with this engagement or this kind of work, because also you have a different views, different stand, different thought. But at least the maximum, the majority coming to this process to be together instead of sidelining or staying away.
Yeah.
So there's additional information what I want to give. So this is now it's growing, being collective, united. So that idea, that thinking is growing. So now more inclusive in the Asia region, what AIPP is doing. So I think this is a good practice. It should be continued, and I think in the future will be strengthened. And the other point is, because today is the day of adoption of the UNDRIP, I actually like to acknowledge those elders, activists who entire process of the UNDRIP strongly advocated, participated, negotiated, and engaged. Because of their effort, their energetic approach, dynamic leadership, we managed to achieve the UNDRIP. So I personally acknowledge their contribution and I do have this respect to them. And because of them, we are now here, and we can talk about the UNDRIP in different levels. Say the UNDRIP is here.
Yeah.
So I really recall this acknowledgement again today, to this day.
Yeah.
All
I
our
agree.
elders and all these activists.
I would fully agree with that, and also contribute by saying that the 12th anniversary of the declaration is in a way of celebrating those individuals and the indigenous movement globally, what they have been able to achieve, and it is a kind of living kind of. We're not like talking relics, but we are like talking a living momentum, and today, yesterday, and tomorrow at the same time. But to me, the anniversary of the declaration is really much a celebration of the global indigenous movement being able to work together towards our situations to be improved in different aspects of the world.
All right. Final question. Let's say 1 year from now, 2020. What are you looking forward to in terms of declaration? If it's just one thing, or
well, I'm really much looking forward to UNDRIP session next year. Hopefully, I'm able to come there. It's a little bit unsure. Currently, this month will be.
Because you're in elections right now, so okay.
Let's see what happens.
Vote for Tuomas.
but thank you for the support. But let's say that the UNDRIP next year session, and I'm really much looking forward for the report that going to be, was it in 2021, on self-determination.
Yeah.
I mean, that is something that I'm really much looking forward, because I think that the UNDRIP as a mechanism is a tool for pushing for the declaration. So I think that one of the highlights of the year is the UNDRIP session. So if you have not been there, you should be there. If you have been there, come again. It's important.
Coming back again, that's important, yes. So what about you? 1 year from now?
Well,
anything to look forward to?
Yeah, let's see how my engagement in the process goes on.
It does. Like
But yeah.
Please
It will.
secure Binota future.
Yes.
Thank you, and yeah, let's see. But I am very much looking forward to see also what Tuomas said, the future study on the self-determination.
Me too. Me too.
And also at the same time, the enhanced participation that we are talking about in the Human Rights Council and the General Assembly level. So I hope we can come some positive result. We can come up. And that's where I also want to take part in the future. And also, right to participation in the decision making is one of the core provisions of the UNDRIP.
Mm-hmm.
And we want to achieve it fully.
Yeah.
So let's work for that and for the self-determination.
Yeah, 100%.
Okay?
Okay.
Yeah, so we'll see you next time.
See you next year.
And the next time is Monday. Monday we will explain what we're doing here. Monday we will tell about what is the context of the annual resolution on Indigenous Peoples and Human Rights, and we will talk about what is the context, how it's going to affect you, and what we are hoping and what kind of negotiations we are having currently. We wanted to use this day for the declaration celebrations, even though we talked a lot of other stuff too.
Which is okay.
It is of course always okay because the questions that you provide us are important. Right. But on Monday, contact negotiations here. Tune in, tell your friend, tell the individual that you don't know but think that he or she would be interested. Hardcore stuff Monday. All
right, so this Monday we'll be going live again. Tuomas will be wearing his gakti as well. So that will be another reason to watch. Apart from the substantive stuff. All right, thanks, man. What are we gonna do?
No, thank you for the questions. Also.
Oh yeah, Tomo. Anybody else?
And everybody who
questions?
Followed. We will continue this celebration to the lakeside of Geneva, and maybe one white wine glass will be there.
Oh, white wine, hey. It's either white wine or Long Island iced tea with this guy. Anyway, all right, thank you, and thank you guys.
See you next time.
All right, how do we switch this thing off?